Hey, I'm Sheena Shuey. I'm a registered social worker and host of the 4Q podcast. I'm passionate about normalising, not pathologising life, and that's not easy. So each episode, I have amazing guests on to share the messy, beautiful ups and downs of life in 4 key questions with tips and tricks along the way. There are moments in life where you can embrace your story and understand that it's okay not to feel okay sometimes. So let's get into it. This is the 4Q podcast. Well, hello there. Long time no speak. For those of you who follow along every week on the 4Q podcast, thank you for having the patience and having the grace to allow me to have some weeks off. It's so appreciated, and I think it's so important for me to practice what I preach, which is when you do need to step aside and take a break and revitalize, re-energize, realign. That's really important. And it really goes against this capitalist idea of work, which brings us to our today's podcast episode, which is around, is your busyness a trauma response? This is a really interesting topic because, as I spoke about in the perfectionism episode, for those who haven't heard it, there's something in our society that rewards workaholics. We really reward people who go above and beyond, work really hard, do whatever it takes to get the achievement. We reward those people, but somebody who chooses to have work-life balance, who goes, actually, I choose my family first and work second, that person isn't respected as much. Well, not by most people. I think once you start living in alignment with your values, you start seeing when other people align with their values, and those are the people that you attract into your life. Because you can see, hey, they've chosen sort of balance, or they've clearly chosen with intention that they are going to put their life and their family before work, which isn't an easy task to do, when for a lot of us, we've been trained that that's kind of how life looks. You finish school, learn some trade, whether it's a trade, whether it's going to uni, whether it's just learning some skills, and then you work. Right? You become a parent as well. And even if you are a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, that is still a job. There's no work-life balance there unless you're having a break from the kids. So coming back to that, we do tend to reward people as a society who go above and beyond, who do anything to reach the financial goal, the business goal, or whatever. And not so much those people who choose to have things like work-life balance, or choose to have their lifestyle as well sort of infused within their day. So maybe they work a 10-hour day, but they choose to have an hour for lunch. They choose to spend half an hour before they enter the office meditating, things like that. So that's on the one card. So when it comes to your busyness, if you're feeling anxious, stressed, exhausted, and constantly busy, there's ways to know if this is just naturally occurred or if this may be a trauma response. So what I mean by that is there's several reasons why we end up completely busy. And these reasons are clearly, obviously, not being able to say no. So whether it's not being able to say no at work, not being able to say no to family and friends. You might work a 60-hour week and then somebody asks you, do you want to hang out? And you don't have the ability to say no. Maybe it's just being uncomfortable with things being not done. So that those are the sort of things that lead to busyness constantly. It's basically an uncomfortableness with rest. It's an uncomfortableness with not doing something productive, not doing something that's constantly moving the needle forward, whether that's the house renovations, whether that's cleaning, whether that's business life, whether that's work, whatever. It's like you're constantly having to do things to get a sense of achievement, whereas doing something like just spending time with the kids, or just spending fruitless time with friends, just talking, hanging out, shooting the breeze, too uncomfortable for you. Or you just sitting down and watching a movie. So having a day where you just watch TV. Having a day where you just read a book. And I'm not talking self-help books. I am not talking books in your niche that grow you further. I'm just talking a book that brings you joy, right? So if you're finding that you're achievement based, like I've just said, like if it's the weekend, you feel like you have to do the house renovations, you feel like you have to do the cleaning, you feel like if you do read or you do listen to a podcast, it has to always be achievement orientated. Like it's like, I have to do this for work, or I have to produce something. That could be a trauma response. And what I mean by a trauma response is that trauma and attachment are intricately linked. So attachment is your attachment to your caregiver growing up and what that relationship was like, what you learned about yourself in the relationship and what you learned about the environment in that relationship. And so if you've had a sort of interesting relationship with your caregivers where, either you've learnt that lessons about yourself and about your worthiness or about the environment, that can really have an impact. And so that's why we link those trauma and attachment things together, because that has a traumatic event on you. It's a long lasting, significant impact on you, right? And so naturally, as parents, I'm a parent, many of you listening are parents. If you aren't, you've had parents. Naturally, if our kids achieve something, we want to shower them with love and praise, going, oh my gosh, good on you. That is so good. I'm so proud of you, right? That's fantastic. Of course you want to do that, especially when your kids have worked really hard, whether it's sport, whether it's academics, whether it's art, whatever it is. If they've worked really hard, of course you give them praise. However, if you only remember getting those sorts of comments when you achieve something growing up, then your busyness could be a trauma response, because your busyness is that you don't feel comfortable with rest, because you don't feel comfortable not achieving, because your worth was tied up in achievement. You only got love, praise, that I'm proud of you, you're good enough, you're so amazing when you achieved. So you can see the link there. Whereas, as parents, of course we give our children praise when we achieve, but a healthy parenting relationship also looks like just randomly saying, I love you, I think you're amazing, and I'm really proud of how you've been doing this, this, and this lately, or I'm really proud of who you've become as a person, or even just non-verbal communication. Parents can often just hug their kids, kiss their kids, give a smile to their kids. All of those things, when your kids aren't doing anything necessarily, teach your child that they are worthy without achievement. They don't need to be constantly doing stuff to feel loved and to feel worthy. And so if you didn't have that as a kid, like your parents just didn't sort of infuse you with love and confidence without achievement, then your busyness is likely a trauma response. So don't feel bad, because many of us had this, because if you're whether you're a millennial, a Gen Z, a Gen X, so for those of you who don't know the generations, whether you're born anywhere between 1970 and, the 2000s even, our parents had this thing where there was a fear that if you gave a child too much praise, too much love, too much positive, positive confirmations and affirmations, I don't know what you'd call it, positive feedback, that you were going to raise a narcissist, or you were going to raise just a spoiled brat. And so there was kind of this messaging when it came to parenting back then. So your parents, what they were told about parenting is that, you don't want them to be too big in their boots. You don't want your child thinking that they're all that, and for those of you who are listening in Australia, there's this thing about sort of being humble, not being a tall poppy, not having that confidence. And so there was this fear that if you gave your child a lot of praise without achievement and all that, again, they would think that they're the bee's knees, all that. So whether it's your parent parenting right now, or whether, again, you're someone who's just flat out busy, difficulty saying no, difficulty with rest, difficulty with just doing things for the sake of joy. So if you had the choice between listening to a podcast that grows your business and takes you further, or listening to just something that makes you happy, you're constantly choosing the podcast. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there's a time and place for that. I listen to so many podcasts and YouTube videos and all those things about business and psychology and things that I'm interested in. But there's also a lot of times where if I go for a walk, I have absolutely no music. Or if I'm spending time by myself, it's silent. I don't have to constantly be achieving, constantly be learning. I don't always have to watch a documentary. I love documentaries, but sometimes it's nice to just listen to music for the joy of it. Just watch something for the joy of it, not because I constantly have to feel like I'm achieving. And so it's a bit of undoing work that has to happen. It's learning how to be uncomfortable with rest when you've been given this constant message throughout your life that you are only worthy and noticed and cared for when you achieve. And again, this is reinforced in workplaces when when you're the workaholic, you get a promotion. when you're the workaholic, you choose your work over your family, over your friends, over your lifestyle. That's rewarded. Sometimes you might get a promotion as well. You might get a pay rise, something like that. Again, when it comes to working out, if you're constantly choosing working out over having a meal with your friends, over, spending time with family, over hanging out with the kids, if you're constantly sort of choosing progress over just being in that moment, then you're so future orientated that you're missing out on life. You're not stopping and smelling those roses you've worked so hard for. The relationship that you have right now, if it's great, when do you stop and just appreciate it and just hang out with this person that you care about, you've chosen to spend your life with? When do you show appreciation for them and just go, thank you for sharing this moment with me? Same with kids. When was the last time you stopped and just gone, wow, you're just so amazing. I cannot believe I created you. I cannot believe two of us came together and created you, and you are just the being that you are. Look at you, and really taking that in. Because if you're constantly hanging out with your kids going, oh, we've got to do this, and then we've got this to go to, and then we've got this to go to, or when you can't, hanging out with your partner and you're like, okay, we've got to run this errand and this errand and this errand, and then, I can only hang out with you for another half an hour because then I've got this on. You can see how you're so future orientated that you're never in the present moment, which means Imagine if you spent 50 years being in the future and then you get to your sort of deathbed and you go, wow, I never really stopped and took it in. I never really enjoyed that moment and was grateful for that moment. And that's really sad because a lot of people do that. And that's why I'm so thankful that most of my clients, I get to catch them early. So most of the clients that I get to work with, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they're not quite on their deathbed yet. And we get a chance to change that so that from their lives onward, they get to be in the moment. And they're not going to be those people who wake up and go, what happened? My life just passed me and I didn't even get to take it in. So there's work to be done, and it's learning how to love yourself regardless of achievement. It's knowing that you're worthy regardless of achievement. It's also regulating your central nervous system so that it's not in this heightened state constantly. So if you feel uncomfortable with rest, if you hate meditations, they really peak you, that could be a sign there's a central nervous system dysregulated, and again, a trauma response. And we know that with trauma responses, we got two ways to address that. There's brain to body things, so using your mind, using thought, using sort of exercises to address some of that and really get to the core of it. And then there's also what we call bottom-up approaches or body-to-brain approaches, where we're really tapping into the body to heal that nervous system. So you can imagine, we've all had that feeling where we've had too much caffeine or coffee or something like that, and then all that caffeine's making our heart race dramatically, and that heart racing, shortness of breath really makes us feel anxious, even though there's nothing to be anxious about. So that's like a body to brain thing too. So if you're curious about this or want to talk about this more, please connect with us. Find us on savasanacollective.com. Head to our Instagram. Check out our free resource library. We've got tons of tools in there, and we're going to be adding some meditations in there soon to regulate your central nervous system. So watch out for that. But yes, I can't wait to connect with you again, and I will see you next episode of the 4Q podcast. Bye for now.